Hello, students, and welcome once again to today's lecture on everything you need to know to survive English class. In this session, we will discuss the work of one of the quintessential American writers, Mr. Ernest Hemingway, known of course to his friends as Mr. Hemingway. As always, I encourage you to follow along in your textbook. It is not available in the campus bookstore, but it may be found both in print and electronically at Amazon.com. Please disregard any rumors you may have heard about the book being available on a BitTorrent site, as downloading it in such a manner would be a violation of federal law, of school policy, and it will give you the herpes. Please turn to page 132 and follow along. Ernest Papa Hemingway, 1899 through 1900, was so named because he lived in a mushroom village with hundreds of other identical Hemingways. Disturbingly, only one of these was a girl. As a journalist and a writer, he became known for having a clean writing style that spoke in common language without frills or flowers, as well as a personal life that, in the telling, has made him out to be a cross between Teddy Roosevelt, Tarzan, and G.I. Joe, only with a lot more alcohol. An ambulance driver in World War I, Hemingway used his experiences as the basis for much of his work, although his fiction includes fewer throat punches than Hemingway's actual life. In addition to his novels, Hemingway also wrote several short stories and works of nonfiction, most of them about burly men who roll up their sleeves, engage in manly activities such as fishing, bull riding, and bacon eating, and then ponder the futility of their place in the universe. His first novel, The Sun Also Rises, tells the adventures of Jake Barnes, a journalist with a war wound that has left him impotent. Barnes is in love with an Englishwoman named Brett, who tells him that they could never have a stable relationship, presumably because there isn't an awful lot of rise left in his son. Jake hangs out with assorted folks who all manage to have affairs with Brett, even though she's engaged to a Scottish man named Mike Campbell. Eventually, he suggests they all go to Pamplona for the running of the bulls, because at that point, who even gives a crap about the little things like breathing anymore? The men get into brutal fights with each other, especially Robert Cohn, the guy in the group they pummel with anti-Semitic remarks. Eventually, Brett runs off to have an affair with a 19-year-old Spanish matador, which is probably the only way to make an impotent war veteran feel even more emasculated. Cohn beats the crap out of the matador, but he still manages to take care of business in the bullfighting ring, which we're sure isn't supposed to be a metaphor at all. Jake finally gets fed up with everything, and he's about to go back to Paris when Brett sends him a telegram begging for help. He finds her in a cheap motel with no money and no matador, and she clings to him just long enough to get to civilization and then run off with her fiancé. So it's safe to say that Hemingway may have had a few issues with women. For Whom the Bell Tolls is the story of Robert Totally Not Ernest Hemingway Jordan, an American reporter embedded during the Spanish Civil War. Jordan falls in with a group of rebels, not in love with the entire group, although that would have been an interesting piece of fan fiction. Aided by the Soviet Union, whom nobody realized was supposed to be the enemy until the late 1940s. In addition to being an ace reporter, Jordan was also a whiz with dynamite, which made him a valuable asset to a bunch of guerrilla soldiers whose primary objective was to, and we quote Hemingway here, blow stuff up all purty-like. While with the rebels, Jordan falls in love with a woman named Maria, who bears the emotional scars of that time the fascist government raped her, murdered her parents, kicked her puppy, and altered the expiration date on a carton of milk in her fridge. Pablo, leader of the rebels, is too much of a scaredy cat to actually commit to any serious operations until they hear about the destruction of another nearby rebel cell. All of a sudden, he turns into Rambo, stealing Jordan's dynamite and rushing off to kill the fascists himself. Jordan catches up with him and helps Pablo blow up the bridge, ensuring that this is the one classic novel Michael Bay would want to film someday. Jordan is maimed when the enemy shoots his horse. He begs Maria to leave him behind and then refuses an offer by one of his comrades to kill him before the enemy arrives. As long as he's alive, he reasons, chewing on a mouthful of shredded barbed wire, he can take a few of those bastards with him. What? No. How do you blow a 4-run lead in the night? No! God, no! They're going to take my kneecaps. And that's where the novel ends. Seriously, there's no final ambush, no glorious death scene, nothing. While there is something to be said for the ambiguous ending, the average high school student isn't a fan of nuance, and tends to get irate when things aren't spelled out for them. For the sake of such students, we suggest appending the following epilogue to the book. As Robert lay in wait, hiding behind the bush, he placed the face of his enemy in his mind. Cool, clean cut, wearing the bold iron cross. No, wait, the Nazis wouldn't be the enemy for 20 years. Whatever. "Oh, Amerikansky, come out and play," said a fascist soldier, who apparently thought he was supposed to be a Russian. "You'll never take me alive, fascist pig," Robert shouted. "That is an acceptable compromise." "Wait, did your accent just become German?" "It's a me, Mario." "You're not even trying now." Just then, an entire squad of Spanish fascists surrounded him, each pointing their guns directly in his face. "Very well, senor," said the fascist, who finally realized he was supposed to be Spanish by reading the preceding paragraph. "Any last words?" "Yeah, yippee-ki-yay, mother." Robert's finger flickered over the dead man's switch, concealed even from the reader. The fascist exploded in a ring of fire, arms and legs everywhere. It was really cool. "Roberto!" Maria rushed into the burning clearing, sweat glistening off her skin. "I knew you were not dead. Now we can be together." "No, Maria, we can't. I'm sorry, but my home planet needs me." Robert stood up like he'd never been maimed at all, brushing pieces of fascist hair out of his mustache and fascist mustache out of his hair. "I'm sorry, Maria. I didn't want you to know. We can never see each other again." "Oh, Roberto!" "Yes, I know." He kissed her in a manly fashion, just before the flying saucer broke through the clouds, throwing down a rope ladder. Robert grabbed onto it as it pulled him into the skies. "Farewell, Maria. Farewell." And that, Mr. Hemingway, is how you get closure. The last book Hemingway published before we glossed over his tragic suicide was The Old Man and the Sea. The novel is about an elderly man named Santiago, who struggles for 3 days to catch a single enormous fish, ties it to the side of the boat, and watches in anguish as it is eaten by sharks. This book somehow got Hemingway both a Pulitzer and a Nobel Prize. To save time actually reading the book, simply ask your grandfather how his last fishing trip went. This concludes today's lecture, my friends. Don't forget I can be found at my office at facebook.com/BlakeMPT, on Twitter at BlakeMP25, and on Twitter at BlakeMP, and on Instagram at BlakeMP25. And remember, although he achieved greatness, consider the life of Mr. Hemingway to be a cautionary tale and not a how-to project. Thank you again for your attention, and we will see you next week.